Story 1. Tea was a frigid December night, 1 week before Christmas. My family always celebrates Christmas at our Hamptons, New York, summer home. The Hamptons are always quiet this time of year because a substantial portion of the real estate there is owned by wealthy individuals who own 2 or 3 other homes elsewhere in the country. My father and I arrived at the house first, before the rest of my family, because Mom and my sister still had work until the following weekend. My father was retired at the time, and I had finished school for winter break, so we decided to visit the Hamptons house early. We all have our own bedrooms in this property, which is located on a peaceful dead-end street. My father turned on the heat and water, as he always does when we return for the first time in months. I brought my PlayStation 3 to play in my room. I spent most of the first day there playing video games. On the first night we were there was a major snowstorm, another reason we wanted to arrive early to avoid the bad road conditions that would last for days following the storm. When I awoke the next morning and walked out to the kitchen, my father inquired as to when I had created the snowman. I said, "What do you mean?" He mentioned, "The snowman in the backyard." I looked out the window and saw at least 2 feet of fresh snow, but there was also a snowman sitting in our backyard. It had 2 sticks for arms, angled upwards, and eyes and a smile carved into its head. The eyes and lips were toward the window. I told my father, "I didn't build that." My father shrugged and remarked, "Must be the neighborhood kids." My father believed it was an innocent joke, and I did as well. However, the following night was when things really went nasty. I was dozing in bed when I heard a distinct pounding on my window. I felt afraid. I pulled the blankets over myself to conceal myself from whoever was out there. But after 5 minutes, I began to wonder if it was snow that had fallen from the roof and blown into the windows. I got up and looked out the window. I screamed because I believed I saw a human, but it was just another snowman standing outside my window. This one had an angry grimace rather than a smile. I screamed for my father, and he rushed inside. I pointed at the window, and this time he was upset. He said he'd go next door in the morning and speak with the kids' parents. I stayed in my sister's room the remainder of the night. The next morning, my father went next door and rang the doorbell, but they were not there. There were no automobiles in the driveway, so they weren't even in town. That was the only adjacent house with children, so it didn't really help explain the situation. Nothing else happened for 5 or 6 days until Christmas Eve. The remainder of our immediate family, as well as all 4 of our grandparents, had entered the house. We were inside the living room. This was before dinner, although it was already dark outside. Someone knocked on the front door rather than pressing the doorbell. We weren't anticipating any more families. I started to feel nervous. My father came over and asked, "Who is it?" Someone on the other side of the door began asking, "Please allow me in. I need help." The door lacks a peephole or windows, and there are no windows that would allow us to see who was on the other side. My father asked, "What's wrong?" The voice on the other line added, "I don't have anyone to celebrate Christmas with. Please help me." We all glanced at each other, and my father said, "Please leave before we call the police." The person on the other end responded, "Okay, I'll leave. Please do not call the cops." He never opened the door. We quickly associated this with the eerie snowman. We knew it had to be connected, and we were correct. On Christmas morning, a message was pinned to the front door. It said, "To the best of my recollection, I just wanted to have some fun. I made the snowman for the boy in the house. I do not have somebody to spend the holidays with. Hurt in one way or another." I believe whoever left that note on our door and made those 2 snowmen was mentally sick or unstable. Given that he came to our front door, it seems unlikely that it was a joke. I believe he was dangerous, and even if he wasn't innately hostile, his actions were enough to make him someone none of us wanted to encounter. Story 2. It was Christmas in 2023. My name is Andre, and I was 21 years old. Our entire family was at Uncle Joshua's house for the holidays. Well, it was Christmas Eve. My immediate family, along with my cousins and other close relatives, said, "Let's go to my uncle and aunt's place in downtown Miami." We are from Connecticut, so we are not used to warm temperatures around the holidays. It was Friday, the day before Christmas Eve. My brother Nico and I, as young single males living in Miami, wanted to go out. We were hearing of a slew of Christmas-themed events taking place in clubs and bars. Nico was 18 at the time, but he had a phony ID, so we assumed he'd be fine. We went to this one club in Miami Beach that was hosting a Christmas-themed event. The majority of people online were wearing Santa hats, so it felt festive, but it was all a waste of time because at the front of the line, the bouncer not only told us it would cost $100 to get in, but he also called Nico out on his phony ID. So we attempted bar hopping. We entered this one bar. There were also some people sporting Santa hats here, which I suppose was to be expected. On Christmas weekend, as we were at the pub, this older woman began talking to Nico. I heard much of their chat. The woman appeared to be in her mid-40s, and I overheard her telling my brother how much she likes younger people with Hispanic accents. To be honest, it seemed spooky and strange, but Nico was probably distracted by the fact that a woman was hitting on him. I simply let him do his thing. The woman was wearing a blue Santa hat and a sexually suggestive Christmas sweater. They were talking for so long that I became friends with the guys sitting next to me at the bar. Nico quickly stroked my shoulder and stated he was going to depart with the woman. I said, "All right." I suppose I felt happy for him. I lingered at the pub for a little time after that, then called an Uber back to my uncle's, believing Nico would be spending the night with a woman. I was in the middle of an Uber journey when my phone rang. Nico was calling me. I picked up, but there was static. It seemed like he had pocket-dialed me, but I heard a man's voice in the background that did not sound like my brother. Then another man yelled. I repeatedly said Nico's name, hoping for an acknowledgement, but the line was eventually disconnected. Obviously, this was a very troubling phone call. I got the feeling he was alone with a woman. I tried phoning him around 15 times before someone answered, but it wasn't Nico. It was the voice of an elderly man with an exceptionally deep voice. When I questioned who this was, he replied he discovered the phone on the pavement. I asked him if he could drop the phone off at my uncle's apartment or meet me somewhere. He did not respond to that. I heard conversation in the background, followed by shouting. Nico's voice rang out in the background, yelling my name and pleading for aid. The call was then disconnected. I requested the Uber driver to pull over because I was freaking out, trying to reach anyone in my family. It was late. Nobody was picking up. I explained the problem to the driver, who recommended I contact the police immediately. That is what I did. The police arrived at my uncle's house, and I woke up my family, warning them that Nico was in danger. I had to offer my best description of the woman's look at the bar, as well as the time he left. My father and I then proceeded to the pub where we were, along with the cops. It was then that I received a call from an unknown number. It was Nico. He was out of breath and gasping into the phone, claiming that he had been kidnapped and almost escaped. He was now using a stranger's phone. We all headed to Nico's location, which was on a dodgy street in northern Miami. When we discovered him, his face was a bloody mess. He had 2 black eyes, and all of his valuables had been stolen. He shared his entire story. He fled with the woman who claimed to have called an Uber for a lift. When the supposed ride came at their pickup location, which was in a secluded back alley, Nico discovered once inside the car that it was not an Uber but a trap. There were 2 men in the car who instantly restrained him and threatened to shoot him if he did not remain silent. They began driving for a bit, and during that time, one of the men called my number, threatening to kill him if he screamed anything, which he did. This explained the bloodied face and black eyes. They destroyed his phone, stole his wallet, keys, and whatever else he had on him. He ran out of the automobile as soon as the car came to a halt and he wasn't being held down any longer. They did not chase him. The automobile drove away and disappeared. He stated that if he did not flee, they would kill him and dispose of his body. Police were apparently unable to identify the woman on the bar's surveillance footage. Nico stated that none of the men were wearing masks, which was one of the reasons he believed they would kill him. This spoiled the entire holiday weekend, but we were all relieved he was still alive. Nico's screaming woke us up in the middle of the night on Christmas. He screamed, "She's in the house." I awoke him from whatever nightmare he was having. I must admit though that his cry, "She's in the house," made me recall her sinister smile and made me sleep with one eye open that night. Story 3. I bought a tiny house with my brother a few years ago. The first year we resided in the house, we hosted Christmas to show the family around and get everyone together for the first time in forever. We don't have the biggest family in the world, so it was just the 2 of us, our parents, our aunt and uncle, our cousin, our sister and 2 nephews. Our sister arrived first, along with her nephews and husband, to assist us with the cooking and preparation. They brought their dog Mika, as well, because they lived 2 hours away. They were going to stay the night at our house. The remainder of our family lives less than an hour away, so they won't be staying. In any case, there wouldn't be much more room in that mansion for extra guests. During our Christmas meal, we briefly discussed some of the recent murders in our neighborhood. Bodies had been discovered in the woods of our county. We didn't talk about it for long because our mother and sister wanted us to move on to the holiday and the kids. We all enjoyed some wine in the living room after dinner and talked while watching a Christmas movie in the background. After a few hours, my family gradually dispersed, leaving only my brother and me, as well as my sister, her husband, and her children. The children went to bed before us. The four of us stayed up late drinking more wine. My girlfriend arrived after 10 p.m. to spend the remainder of the night with me because her entire family had left. Christmas night came to an end, and it was time to go to bed. My girlfriend woke me up by shaking me. The room was still dark. I groggily peered at the clock next to my bed, which read 2-something a.m. I asked my girlfriend what the problem was. She murmured, "Listen." I listened and heard Mika growl in the hallway. I got out of bed and went into the hall to see what was happening. Then I noticed that our house's back door was wide open, and a cool breeze began to blow in my face. Mika was peering out the door. I looked to see if anyone was outside, and as I approached the rear door, I heard my brother's voice cry out my name in the darkness outside. He sounded distant, like he was in the woods. I was concerned he was in trouble or needed assistance with something. I walked back to my room and told my girlfriend. I stepped outdoors with my shoes and coat on, holding a flashlight. There was a little covering of snow on the ground, enough to detect footsteps flowing from the back door down to the back deck and into the woods. I yelled back my brother's name loudly. I heard his voice call my name again. It was established that he was now in the woods, but as I approached the trees, his footsteps faded and became increasingly difficult to detect, making it impossible to continue following them altogether. I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Where are you? What is wrong?" Every time my brother called, I heard his voice repeat my name. His voice sounded the same distance away. I was hesitant to venture further out from my house for fear of becoming lost in the woods. I finally tried contacting my brother's phone, but he did not answer. I went a little further into the trees, but suddenly my brother's screams had ceased. I called out into the woods, but there was utter silence. Not even the sound of a bug in the freezing weather, only the sound of a gentle breeze. Suddenly, my phone rang. I hoped it was my brother, but it was actually my girlfriend. When I picked up, she remarked, "Chet, George is in his bedroom right now." What I stated didn't make sense. Throughout my time in the woods, I kept hearing his voice. I asked her to see if my sister's husband was still on one of the pull-out couches. She said, "Yes," 30 seconds later. Suddenly, I felt like I wasn't alone in the woods, as if someone was ready to grab me from any direction. I went back the direction I had come and began running as quickly as I could. I didn't stop until I noticed the backyard light from my house becoming visible through the trees. I returned to my house, and everyone was now awake. When I told George and everyone else that Mika was growling and there were footsteps leading into the woods, they all looked horrified. But the frightening aspect was that I was certain that the voice I was hearing was that of my brother, and whoever it was knew my name. We debated phoning the cops for half an hour before finally doing so. A police officer approached us and simply asked us if anything had been stolen, if we knew somebody who may hurt us, and so on. Then, after half an hour, he left, telling us to phone back if anything further happened. I'm not sure if this had anything to do with the killings that were happening in our area at the time, but I thought it was worth including in the story. Nothing else happened after that night, but we can't logically explain anything. I'm still terrified to go into or near the woods after dark.